Okay, just give me a second. It's setting up the Facebook Live feed. And if you can't hear Zelda, that is not a technical glitch. Okay, and all right, the Facebook Live feed looks like it's good. And off we go. It looks like I can't do YouTube at the same time, which is quite all right with me. Hold on. So I'm going to go back to what I was doing. Give me a moment. All right. Can everyone see the opening slide on my screen? The Sunday Business Sermons with Jane Friedman. Are we all good? Yes, wonderful. All right. Full steam ahead now. Thank you all for joining me for this little experiment, which I'm running through Zoom and live broadcasting on Facebook. Those who are attending with me in the Zoom meeting room, you're welcome to interact with me on the chat, which I'll keep open and keep an eye on. You can also use the Q&A box if you wish. I have an eye on both. And let me just tell you why I'm doing these sessions, aside from the fact that many of us are staying at home a lot more than usual. So often I get interviewed on podcasts or I'm on a panel at a conference and I'm asked so much about how to get published. I'm asked about traditional publishing and self-publishing and agents and querying and submissions and all of that stuff that I'm known for. But I don't often have an opportunity to talk about how I run my business or some of the mistakes I've made, some of the things that I've learned, like some of the more advanced material, in fact, that I think comes into play when you're trying to make money from something that has nothing to do with books. On some rare occasions, I have an opportunity to share what I've learned one-on-one. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is highly personal. I think it's pretty subjective. I don't know how many principles are universally applicable, but I hope you do take away something from what I have to share. And you also see kind of the scope and the long road, the ups and downs that I've had over the years with online teaching for today. And of course, I'll be broaching other topics on other Sundays. The other reason I'm doing this is I think that a lot of people do not understand how I make money. Even though I try to talk about it frequently, even my own family doesn't really know how I make money. I mean, my husband knows, okay, sort of. I think he pretty much knows at this point. He might not have known 2 years ago. But when the lockdown started, I had a full calendar of conferences, about 17 events I was supposed to be speaking at. And of course, I only went to 2 of the 17. And so my family was immediately concerned that I was going to not be making any money this year. And, the simple truth is that it's a small portion of my business, the speaking. It's really, I do it for many different reasons. I do it to stay in the mix, to understand what concerns writers. I do it for marketing purposes, of course. I think it's really important to be out there in person talking to people. It generates trust. And, I do get paid at this point for speaking, but I actually earn more money sitting at my desk. Like if I just stay in my office for 8 hours, I can generally earn more money that way than going to speak at a conference. And so that's part of what today's sermon is about online teaching and how that has been a really meaningful contribution to my business. So I'm going to start at the beginning of my journey, as it were, with online education and talk about my traditional employment when I worked at a mid-sized publisher in Cincinnati. So the name of this company is F&W Media. You probably know the brand that I worked for, Writer's Digest. That's, the brand that everyone's familiar with. But F&W was the corporate parent. And so when I started at F&W Media, this goes back to 1997, I worked in multiple divisions, but ultimately ended up primarily at Writer's Digest. There was a very active online education division at the company, which was unusual for a publisher then and now. And it was based in correspondence schools. So there was like a correspondence school that was tied to the Artists magazine, and there was one that was tied to Writer's Digest magazine. And around the year 2000, Writer's Digest saw the writing on the wall, the woman who ran that division, and she moved it to an online platform that was, I think, coded, from the ground up, from scratch. And it was called Writers Online Workshops, and that launched around 2000. And this was even before I had joined the Writer's Digest brand, so I wasn't really part of that innovation. But it was a very strong piece of the Writer's Digest business, and it was very innovative and forward-thinking for the time. And they really just took the elements of that correspondence school, which you would study for weeks with a particular writer or author to achieve some goal, whether that was related to short stories or novels or personal essays or memoir. But they were long-term courses, like 8-week, 12-week, even like 16-week courses. And so by the time I took over Writer's Digest as publisher, this was in 2008, this was a very mature business by this point. And there were also a lot of competitors. So you had Gotham, you had Media Bistro, and there's at least one other major competitor that I'm now forgetting. And the platform was also getting a little tired, but it still worked, and there were repeat students year after year. So when I joined as publisher, I did not understand online education, even though I was now at the head of this division, and I relied greatly on the person who ran it at the time, Joe Stolenwork, to bring me up to speed. And I doubt Joe is listening to this or cares, but thank you, Joe, for your service. I don't know that it was ever adequately appreciated. Around 2009, as part of a whole brand relaunch, this was renamed Writer's Digest University, and it started encompassing different types of things. And the big innovation that I introduced in collaboration with my colleagues were webinars. So you are now on a webinar. I have, by accident, become this person who knows a lot about webinars because I was part of this program at Writer's Digest that we launched. Most webinars have the reputation of being dull, dreary, things that corporations or businesses run to train their employees, and things that they don't want to be trained on. It's a kind of even the word itself is a little deadly. People don't generally get enthusiastic about joining a webinar, although as of today, I think that's changing a little bit, of course. But it turned out to be a brilliant move that no one knew was coming. It was just a very great educational component to the other long-term classes that we were running. So the webinars were, just one time only. They were a lot cheaper than the long-term courses, although they were still expensive because F&W's policy in those days was you charge more, charge twice as much as you think you can charge. Because then you have fewer people to deal with on customer service. I mean, it wasn't quite that crass, but it was very much charge more and serve fewer people. And I do not agree with that philosophy, but that's what it was at the time. So this was, I had no experience doing webinars, but I was tapped and my colleagues were tapped as being the first people to teach these things. And so how do you charge for a webinar for this education? You have never before presented one. It was a bit of an awkward situation. But I had one really strong advantage. I had been presenting at writing conferences for years by this point. I'd been going to conferences since 2001. I had all sorts of curriculum already stored up. Every time I go to a conference, I teach a workshop on something, right? So I had all of these slide packs. I had all of these workshops that I had presented numerous times. And I realized that it wasn't really that big of a difference to present a webinar at a conference or present a workshop at a conference and then take that same material and present it as a webinar. I mean, you do have this like weirdness of not having people in the room, like there's no energy to draw from. But if you've been presenting on a certain topic for some amount of time, you do develop some confidence in what you're saying. You understand where maybe the questions or the pain points are, and it becomes easier. If I had never before presented at a conference, I think the webinar initiative would have failed. But I had that foundation. underneath me. So I forgot to mention this little screenshot. This is you can see the slides here are like really kind of dreadful. And appropriately, this was for a webinar called The Dreaded Synopsis. I wasn't thinking about visual interest when I was doing these webinars. It was the quality of the presentation was sound, but the visuals were pretty bad, as you can see. Over time, I got a little bit better at this. I started actually adding images. I used less text on a slide, which I would encourage you all to do if you're giving presentations. Try to keep it 1 point per slide, as little text as possible. Images help a lot. You can see my principles at work if you've been to any of my classes. So I did improve, fortunately, over time. Then I left Writer's Digest actually not long after that webinar initiative. I ended up teaching as a professor at the University of Cincinnati for a couple years. And then I moved on to VQR, a literary journal in Charlottesville, Virginia. And over these 4 years, one thing remained constant though. I kept teaching those webinars for Writer's Digest on a freelance basis. So rather than teaching them as an employee and doing it as part of my salaried job, now I was doing it on a revenue share basis. So, Writer's Digest would do all the registration and customer service. I would come in and teach for that 2 hours or however long it was, and then I would get a cut of the registrations. And, their agreements vary based on the instructor, but depending on what sort of session it was, and when I had renegotiated my deal, I was earning somewhere between 20 and 30% of the registration fees after, after the net figure came through. So this was some of the best time I ever spent as far as making money. I mean, it was curriculum I already had in hand. Often Writer's Digest was very risk averse. They did not want to branch out into new topics. They wanted to do the tried and true. So that meant I didn't have to do a lot of new work each time I presented the webinar. And it was just a great piece of extra income on the side. Even though I had these full-time jobs, it was easy to fit in a webinar. Then in June 2014, I went full-time freelance. I left the literary journal that I was at. And that's, when I began my home office with my assistant, Zelda, always helping. And I realized that there was a lot of opportunity kind of untapped in how much I could earn through online education. And I started running little experiments. So in early 2015, I launched a class that I called Social Media Bliss. For me, this was during a very different era of social media. I would not run this class today. And that's in fact a problem that I'm going to discuss with running this class. It was the first long-term class I did, 12 weeks long, running from January to March. And I had 2 different tiers of registration. I had a premium tier that was limited to 8 people. And then I had a basic tier. And the difference between the tiers, there are 2 critical differences. One is the premium people could join me for live lectures, and they were on Monday nights and they were using Zoom. I arrived at Zoom use long before the lockdown. So I was using it in 2015 to run online courses. And it worked wonderful. Those 8 people, it was very intimate. I got to know the students really well. They were paying a premium for interacting with me at the time. And then they also got a critique of their platform at the end of the course. And obviously they had access to me all the time. I developed a small community site for the class. This was at a network called Mighty Bell, which at the time was free. Mighty Bell still exists, but I think at this point you have to pay for its use, and I wouldn't use it again anyway. I would Facebook groups for community elements. But in any event, I used Mighty Bell to bring together all of the students, the premium students and the basic level students. And That's where I would share additional resources, discussion points. People could ask each other questions, compare notes. So it was really good for engagement in between the live lectures, which were once a week. The basic students they couldn't attend the live lectures, and they didn't get a critique, but they got access to everything else, the recording of the lecture, of course, the slide packs. And then I also held office hours. So the basic registration students could attend the office hours and ask questions. So for me, this turned out so well. I can't remember how many basic people signed up, but it must have been maybe at least 20. So it was a really nice moneymaker for me, and it opened my eyes to just how well I could do if I had a well-conceived course. But one of the issues I found is that 12 weeks is a really long time. And my speaking engagements and conferencing was ramping up, and it became harder and harder to conceive of teaching these long-term courses when I was traveling so much. It was just an added stress. And so I have not done a 12-week course like that ever since. It's the only time I've done it. It's not that I don't want to do it again, although now that we're in lockdown, maybe I would consider it. So for those of you who are interested in the long-term sort of class, this sort of arrangement worked really well for me. Then in late 2015, oh, I see that there's a question that came up that I'll address. This is from Yasmin. She asks, it's an excellent question, and I'm so glad you've brought it up. How did I advertise or market this first course to get the registrations? And this is where I just had an advantage that many people don't have. And that advantage was a mailing list. So I had been blogging since 2008. I had my own website established since 2010. The first blog that I did was with Writer's Digest. So it was an employer-owned blog. Then I had my own site with a blog I owned. I had a really strong social media presence on Twitter and Facebook. So getting people to register wasn't that difficult as long as I knew that it was something people wanted and the price was right. And no question, the prices on this course are premium level prices. But I had experience at this premium price point with my Writer's Digest online workshop. Like, I saw the prices that people were willing to pay for those 12-week courses at the Writer's Digest school. So people were paying $500, $600, $700 regularly if they were really focused on achieving something through this course. So I knew the market could bear it. And I built in this scarcity, right? That only 8 people were going to get in at the premium level. And I also wanted people who were serious. So having a higher price also attracts people who are quite serious. So yeah, the advertising and marketing was online only. It was totally organic, meaning I didn't advertise. I didn't run any search ads. I didn't run Facebook ads. I strictly relied on the people who already knew who I was, and that was enough. That was enough for me. So then in late 2015, I did a different type of experiment. One of the themes of today's sermon is that I get bored easily. I never seem to do the same thing twice. So rather than repeat that 12-week course, I decided to do something that was more webinar style. And at the time, I was really fixated on doing a branding effort called MBA for Writers. I bought the domain name, and I self-published a book under this imprint. It doesn't really mean anything now, but at the time I thought it might become something, right? But then I abandoned it. So this is something that I set up on Big Marker. So Big Marker is another platform that I've since abandoned, but it was really good for me for this particular effort because it was like an all-in-one community system for offering basically webinar style education. It had all of the registration and payment functionality built in. And they were also in their very early days of operation. And so I was able to kind of use it for a song. It didn't cost me hardly anything at all. And I had a series of 6 sessions. I think it was 6. And you could either sign up for any one of the 6 at a flat rate. And it was, I can't remember now what I charged, but it was probably somewhere around $25 to $50 flat rate, or you could buy the whole package. And if you bought the whole package, it would have been the equivalent of maybe getting 1 or 2 sessions free. So I had income coming in for that, for the people who bought into the whole series, and then people who just wanted that one topic. And these were my bread and butter topics, like how to get published, how to self-publish, like the stuff that I would present again and again and again at conferences. Although I have to say, the danger of doing this was competing against myself with Writer's Digest. So I was still doing the webinars with Writer's Digest. And when I did this, I did get my hand slapped, and they were like, you know, if you still want to do webinars with us, you can't engage in this kind of activity. Like, you've got to be exclusive to us on certain things. And you know, that made sense, right? So I agreed, and I didn't end up running this another time. Again, the registration, the marketing of all of this, the registration numbers were driven primarily through my email newsletter list, through my blog, and through social media. The people that already knew me, again, no advertising spend, which I know this is where my advice for many people is not helpful, because one of the hardest parts of online teaching or offering an online class is getting the people to sign up. And I had already built over 5, 6, 7 years the audience that I was marketing to. And if I hadn't done that, there's no way I would have been able to be successful with these initiatives. Okay, just taking a look at the questions here. Maddie says that I'm deterred from online courses because of the ongoing responsibility to keep it up to date or retire it. And how do I deal with that? I deal with it by not making courses available after the fact. So like the social media bliss, gone. Like, I mean, I still have the old recordings, but I would never in a million years make that available because it's so out of date at this point. And that's one of the things you have to be cognizant of. If you're doing anything that's supposed to bring you money over many years, you do have to update that material if you're going to keep marketing and selling it. So one of the reasons I happen to like webinars so much is that, you know, you're not making it perpetually available. It's a one-time thing. And when it's done, and you move on. I really love that sort of style of work. For me, it's not hard. Some people think it's high churn, but to me, it keeps things moving. It's more exciting that way. But Maddie, I'm gonna touch on that again here in a second. So with the next course that I did, I get a little bit smarter each time with how much work is involved. So in 2017, I launched another course that was similar to Social Media Bliss, and it was how to write a book proposal 10-step action plan. Now, in the past, I had run a book proposal course, and so this was an update of an older curriculum I had developed. But I felt like this was just so much better. I had broken it down into more manageable pieces, into these 10 steps. And my goal for this was to run it as an interactive class. I think it was for 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks tops. I really contracted it. I was like, no more 12-week courses. I don't have that sort of time with my travel schedule. I need to knock this out in a month. And I did. But I had a similar premium basic structure where the premium people got a critique, and then the basic people did not, although I didn't have the live component with this. No live component, it was all recorded lectures. And then there was a Facebook group and office hours to supplement engagement and community. And that also worked out really well. And as far as my use of Facebook, I just feel like everyone already goes there for the most part. Yes, there were a few students who were Facebook holdouts, but you just make it clear up front in the registration, like, our community engagement will be through a Facebook page. And, you know, sorry if you don't use it, but I can't be everywhere at once. I have to choose one place. So my goal with this one, though, was after I ran the live or the active course, I wanted to turn it into a self-study. And so after the course was done, I changed, I changed the marketing page for it. I indicated it was a self-study that anyone could sign up. And that has continued to bring me some really nice income since it's been a self-study. So in 2018, I got 12,000 off of it. In 2019, I got 16,000 off of it. As of this year, the sales are starting to fall off quite a bit. And I think part of it is the age, like the issue that Maddie brought up, like how do you keep these things updated? And, when people see the course was produced in 2017, they're going to think twice. Although I think a lot of the material is evergreen, although yes, it is time to refresh it. So it's again, with the marketing here, it's something where I had a built-in advantage. I've had one of the top ranking blog posts on how to write a book proposal for years now. So one of the reasons that I'm able to get those really nice figures for a self-study without any marketing whatsoever is that when people go to search Google, they come up with this blog post that I wrote that mentions, hey, I've got this course. It's a self-study course. You can register now and get immediate access for $149. So that's what I charge. It's also been really useful to me just giving it out for free to clients. So no question, I've probably given the course away 5 times as much as I've sold it to people who I work with, who I know need the material. So it's also benefited my business in that way, and it makes people feel like they're getting more value. Okay, so let me get a drink of water here. Then something really big happened with the webinars that I was still doing for Writer's Digest, still. Now we're 9 years in now to me doing webinars for Writer's Digest. F&W, the parent company, filed bankruptcy. And this was bad. Like this was hard to take because I had already done a couple webinars, like 2 of my biggest webinars of the year with them in January and March. And I hadn't received payment. And it was just like soul crushing. I depended so much on seeing those payments come through. And I knew that they were not coming. And it really pushed me to reevaluate what I was going to do if F&W and Writer's Digest ceased to exist. Fortunately, Writer's Digest has survived. They were bought by another company. But I had to really rethink what I was doing. Fortunately, this is just one of those things that you can't plan for. My then partner, Mark, was still an employee of F&W. And of course, when the company dissolved over the summer, he no longer had a job. But I certainly needed help by that point. And so we did 2 things. Number one, we got married. We got married that summer that he lost his job. And then he also became my employee. So then I felt like I really had the help and the support and the resources I needed to actually do a webinar series on my own. Because when you run a webinar, you don't want to be doing it by yourself. You want someone to help with the registration and the customer service and the tech support and all of those little details. And then after the webinar, like the recording and the follow-up, like there's a million moving pieces, right? And so what was great about the Writer's Digest setup was like they took care of all of the moving pieces and I just showed up to teach. How beautiful is that? So with Mark coming on board as an employee, I thought, okay, this is the moment. This is I'm not going to be competing against Writer's Digest now because they're not operating as of yet. And in October of 2019, I went out with my first webinar taught by Gigi Rosenberg, 5 Steps to Your Elevator Pitch. And why didn't I just teach one by myself? I don't know. I can't explain the psychology behind it. This somehow felt safer to me to be facilitating for someone else. And so when I run these now, it's 50-50 split. So the instructor gets 50% of the registration and I get 50%. And I take care of all the customer service and the marketing and et cetera, et cetera. Again, the marketing is all organic, not paid, to my own lists through social media. And of course, to the extent the instructor is able to market I welcome that, but I'm not depending on it. And those sessions have generally run anywhere from $20 up to $35 for the more advanced business topics. And as far as how to determine that price, I mean, there's so many variables. But I think somewhere between 20 and 30 for me makes things pretty accessible for most folks. And gives, plenty of money to go around for both me and the instructor if we get a decent turnout. Now, as you know, just because for those of you joining me on Zoom, you know that my preferred webinar tool is Zoom. And it was an easy choice to make because I was already using Zoom for my meetings, for other, just to run my business. Zoom has been indispensable for many years now. So I already had a pro plan, and it cost $40 to upgrade to include the webinar service. And then since then, I've upgraded even further. So like the $40 level gets you 100 webinar attendees. And then if you upgrade to 140 a month, then you get up to 500 attendees. So that's been well worth the investment. No complaints there. I have researched so many webinar tools you wouldn't believe. I always look at new ones that come out because I'm hoping for, I don't know, just more functionality or more flexibility. Zoom's not perfect by any means, but so far for the cost and how it integrates into the rest of my business, it's going to be hard to get me to move off of it. I think one of the drawbacks for me of a lot of other webinar tools is that it's really hard to charge. So Zoom has integrated PayPal payment processing. So you can either make the webinar free or you can check a box and then you can charge a registration fee and it all goes through PayPal. I wish there were, Stripe, or like you could offer a second method for people to pay, but so far that's just not an option, and it hasn't been worth it to me to work to try and bolt on some other solution. So that's what I've done so far with Zoom. Now for that self-study course that I mentioned earlier, the book proposal course, I used to use a platform called Zippy Courses. I had been using it for maybe 5 years. It was a plugin for my WordPress site. It cost me, gosh, I want to say $200 a year for that plugin. And it worked great. Like I have no complaints about the Zippy Courses plugin. They also have a fully hosted version if you don't want to deal with the tech issues related to putting a plugin on your site. But I realized I wasn't offering a sufficient number of online courses, at least of the style of the book proposal course, that it really merited having a learning management system. So Zippy Courses plugin and some other plugins like that, they're called learning management systems. I'm trying to think of the biggest LMS. It's escaping me now, but there are some really big ones out there that, you just pay for the plugin every year and it works great and it's kept up to date and it has support. And I like this method because it gives me absolute control. Like I'm a control freak over these things, and I'm also really cheap. So I don't want to be sharing a percentage of my revenue with some service provider. I don't want them taking 10% or 15% or whatever it is. I just want to pay my fee and know upfront what I'm going to be giving the technology piece of it. So that's why I've chosen to do the WordPress plugin system. But this is not the best choice for people who aren't really comfortable with WordPress sites, who have to hire tech help. I can do all this on my own, and that gives me another advantage. I can handle these plugins, I can figure them out. I'm good at troubleshooting or manipulating them to serve my purposes. So that's driven my choices here. But to get back to what my original point was going to be, I moved from Zippy Courses because I didn't feel like it was really being updated and developed any longer from the plugin side. And I switched over to Restrict Content Pro, which is not a learning management system. It's a membership plugin, basically, that allows you to keep some types of content behind a wall. And so when people register for the book proposal course, what happens is they essentially become a member of that course, and they can access all of that course, but they can't access any other course that they haven't become a member of. If you're curious about this solution, if you feel up to the tech challenge, I would look for Paul Jarvis's set of instructions. He's the one that kind of inspired me to take this path. This is how he runs his courses. So if you just look for Paul Jarvis Restrict Content Pro, you can find his explanation of how to make this work for you if it sounds attractive. The alternative for most people, the easier solution is something like Teachable. You could go to other like community teaching sites like Skillshare. There's a really good platform called Podia. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Podia. And gosh, there have to be countless platforms at this point. Teachable, I think, is the most popular, at least in the writing and publishing community. And it's much more, they're more fully featured. You don't have to worry about the tech. They have a lot of bells and whistles. And everything just looks good out of the box. So if you're really new to this, if you're not so comfortable with WordPress backend, I would suggest looking at one of those solutions instead of what I've done, which is advanced. Affiliate marketing is one of those things that, I feel like I've had a love-hate relationship with it, and I don't even engage in it, and I have a love-hate relationship with it. So I mention affiliate marketing because I know that many of you do not have the foundation that I do in terms of a big email list, a big social media presence. I've been at this for 10 years now. I've got these marketing assets that help my online classes enroll the number of students I need to make it worth my time. Affiliate marketing is what many folks will use in order to get the registrations. So what happens is if you're using a platform like Teachable, for example, they have an affiliate marketing tool built in, which means if someone else links to your course, wherever that happens to be, it could be on social, it could be in an email newsletter, it could be a private link, whatever. If someone shares a link to your course and a student registers because of it, that person gets a cut that you determine. And so what people like to say is that these are sales you wouldn't have otherwise had. If you can get other people marketing the course for you because they're going to get a financial reward for doing so, it kind of evens out the marketing burden. And it's not money that you have to pay up front. You don't need to have an advertising budget. But of course, you do need to know who to approach, and you have to be trusted by that person. So like, if you take your course, if you develop a course and bring it to me and ask me to be an affiliate, there's no way that I'm going to recommend it unless I know you or I have trust in the material that you're presenting. Like there usually has to be a relationship there for it to work out. So I haven't done affiliate marketing for any of my courses, and part of it is laziness. Like it would require me to find a service to help facilitate this. It would require me to reach out to people and ask if they want to be an affiliate. To me, it's just a huge headache. And I have the students I want. Like I'm not looking for more students. I'm in a very fortunate position. So I know that many people who run courses that are kind of in perpetuity, like Paul Jarvis, he has a MailChimp Essentials course that he runs that runs always. I mean, he has open and closed periods when you can register, and I don't know if he does an affiliate program, but for those types of courses where you're planning to make money off of it for many, many years, it certainly makes sense to have affiliate marketers that are spreading the word about it. So I haven't done that, and I generally don't serve as an affiliate either, just because I have my own things to market. I don't, if I'm going to recommend someone's course, I'm probably going to recommend it because I believe in it. I don't want to recommend it because I'm getting paid for it. But that's not to say that affiliate marketing is wrong. It's very helpful, especially in the early stages of spreading the word about something. So that brings us to the current day, 2020, the year of no conferencing, which has created a bit of an awkward situation for me. I already have this, let's say, bustling online education program. I'm doing webinars twice a month. And all of these conferences I agreed to present at in person, some of them are going online. and other relationships and partnerships I have with writing organizations, a lot of them are doing more online programming, more than ever before. And quite naturally, they're reaching out to me and saying, do you want to do an online class? But this isn't necessarily, for me, a welcome proposition, because I don't want to compete against myself. So I'm actually, again, doing webinars with Writer's Digest. I'm doing topics with them that I consider exclusive to them. I don't want to do them myself. I don't want to do them with online conferences, because it would, again, it just, there's a certain amount of scarcity that at this point in my career that I want to have, so that I'm not damaging some organization's revenue by offering the same thing too many times in close succession. So it's gotten a little complicated, to try and find things or find sessions that I can offer to various conferences that are going online that aren't interfering with my own homegrown online teaching. So far, everyone has been so kind and understanding, and I have no complaint. But it does, you have to. It takes some triage for it to all work out. Okay, so I know there are quite a number of open questions here that I want to get to. Sayward is asking about Skillshare, that she's seen a few successful indie writers using this platform for webinars. Unfortunately, I don't have any experience with it, but I have no reason to doubt its performance or its feature set. I think I may have even received a couple of marketing emails from them asking me to put my stuff up on Skillshare. So I think those types of places are really ideal to go to when you don't yet have your own audience yet, when it really benefits you to maybe be part of a larger learning community like that, because there's so much on Skillshare. And so that, I think that makes sense when you're starting out. For me, I like my ownership, I like my control, and I'm going to keep things as homegrown as possible. Sarah asks, how do I decide when to abandon an initiative? And I think the sad answer is I abandon it because I've already done it once and then I lose interest. So it can be both a strength and a weakness. I'm always looking to try something new, although I do consider the webinars to be an ongoing thing that I do, because well, first of all, I now have an employee, my husband, that I need to pay his salary, right? And so the webinars are a very immediate and direct way that he can contribute really meaningfully to my business, and I can't do it without his help. So I can see how that's going to become really core to my business model. With the long-term classes, I could see maybe going back to that if I'm not traveling as much, but I would definitely be more strategic about what I'm planning to do. So in other words, I don't want to create another long-term class where I can't reuse the material. So like the book proposal course, I was able to repurpose that into a self-study and make it helpful for a lot of different pieces of my business. I'm never going to do another social media course because it goes out of date too quickly, although I might do a webinar because, the webinar is a one-time thing and then it's gone. So those are the sorts of considerations that I have. Renee asks if I would mind sharing the size of my list. I have several lists that have developed over time. You should not start out this way, but this is how my business has evolved over the years. So I have my core list is called Electric Speed. This is the email newsletter I send out every 2 weeks. It's the very first newsletter I began, going back to 2009, maybe. And at this point, it's up to 34,000 people. Now that doesn't, I do not have a 100% open rate. The open rate, is somewhere between 25 and 35%. But that's a real powerhouse of my marketing. I also have blog newsletters that go out so people can sign up to receive the daily blog alert and the weekly blog digest. So combined, those two lists, that's another 10,000 people. And over time, I've started developing a list for online classes. So people who, sign up for webinars and other classes or on their own list, and I let people know about new offerings through that more targeted mailing. So it's sizable, right? Not many people enjoy that level of marketing power. And I do not, I take it very seriously how and when I email people, and I try not to exhaust the list. Mary asks if I've ever combined a published workbook with a course. I have not, but it's a fabulous idea. It certainly would give me yet another way to benefit or have additional profit from something. It's just nothing that I've made time for. Tiffany's asking how big my audience was at a particular time, my existing email list. I should maybe, I gave the numbers for my list as it stands today, but maybe it would be encouraging to hear what my list size was back in 2014 or 2015 when I got started full-time freelance. At that time, the list was probably more around 5,000 people. So the list dramatically grew when I added a pop-up to my site, which was, I don't know, 2016 or thereabouts. So that's when I was getting really serious about, I want an email list and I do not want to be reliant on social media to reach the people who like what I do. So yeah, I don't think it doesn't take like a 5-figure email list to successfully get people into a class. If you're in the 4 figures, I think it's doable. Lisa asks for suggestions on determining price, and it's so many factors, but you have to consider the topic. So like hard business topics, you can generally charge more in my experience. Obviously, the longer the course, the more you can charge for it. I would consider your own reputation or brand, what that might be able to command, how much of a risk are people taking. You can charge people more if you're well-known, trusted, respected. Certainly don't, I mean, if you feel like you're on you're in the early stages of this, I think, however, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to undercharge. So one thing to do, especially if you're light on the social proof end of things, is make your first class or first lecture free, or create some sort of freebie that ties into the class or that sets up the challenges, and circulate that however you can. Like, it depends on where your marketing strengths lie. If it could be a YouTube channel, it could be Facebook, you could put it on Vimeo and link to it from social. You could send it to your email list. So make that first lecture free so that people get a taste of your style. They see how helpful and valuable you can be, even if you're doing something for free. I did that for Social Media Bliss. I recorded a lecture in advance, and I used that to help market and promote the entirety of the course. So I would encourage that, which gets me off the topic of determining pricing, but it's hard. And you might not figure out what the right price is for you without a little bit of experimentation. I do think it helps to have tiers of pricing for the longer term courses. So giving people a choice will generally get you more students, even if it's just 2 options, a cheaper option and a more expensive option. And I've seen some courses, they have 3 options. I probably wouldn't go beyond 3, but 2 to 3 is good. Adnan is asking if I believe success is unlikely for a first-time webinar attempt or someone just starting to develop a platform. I don't think success is unlikely. Of course, it depends on your definition of success. I think that sometimes it's hard to charge right out of the gate if you're not well known, as I've been suggesting. So you may have to do some things for free first if you're not yet well known to your target audience. By the time I was offering webinars and charging for courses, I had reams of free material available on my blog. Obviously, I had spoken at a lot of conferences, I had published many articles, I had a book out. So when you have that sort of credibility, it greases the wheels, even if you don't necessarily have the marketing list or the social accounts. People see your name and they recognize it, and that matters a lot. So, think about it in terms of how recognizable you are, how you've been of service to the community, because that will help increase the chances that you can be successful when you put out that first paid course. Jenny says, I do a lot of LinkedIn coaching and account creation in my day job, and I'm launching an online course. Is this a topic you think writers would embrace? Maybe on the nonfiction side. Certainly I see people who are closer to some sort of a business community, whether that's real estate or health or self-help topics. I do think LinkedIn might be helpful. I think you'd want to look at LinkedIn. I'm sure you would look at LinkedIn groups, but I know that a lot of people try to market and promote their books through LinkedIn relationships, engagement, posting to groups, blogging on LinkedIn. I'm not terribly familiar with it as a platform for marketing and promoting. But if you looked at it from that hard benefit, I think you might be able to get somewhere. And I think you'd have to be pretty narrow with your perspective, like just target the business authors or people doing nonfiction. Let's see. Maddie asks, any best practices for a webinar that involves showing participants how to use Excel, for example, or I don't know that they're necessarily best practices. I do a webinar with Writer's Digest frequently about how to use WordPress, which is a live tutorial. So it can be done. But yes, I agree that when you do those sorts of techie tutorials, something where you're trying to achieve something in a piece of software, there are settings on your computer that will highlight your mouse pointer or do other things that help people follow where you're going on the screen. Make sure that you do things slowly if required, that you're ready to repeat them, that you have a lot of comfort level with what you're doing, that you've tried it before, that you're prepared for errors that may come up. I think it also helps to have a little step-by-step on paper in front of you of all the different things that you're going to show so that you don't forget. I hope that helps. Let's see what time. Okay. Lucy asks, what service do I use to manage my email list? I use MailChimp. And I don't necessarily recommend or not recommend MailChimp. It's just the one that I've been with for a long time now, and I have no patience for changing my tech unless I absolutely have to. There are other options out there that are good for marketing products like ConvertKit. And then if you need a cheaper mailing service, you might take a look at MailerLite. Frida asks which aspect of my business I enjoy the most. And is there a correlation to the financial return you get from that activity? I really love doing my paid newsletter, which I haven't talked about at all today, the Hot Sheet. So this is a paid newsletter I send out every 2 weeks about the industry. It's pretty advanced, and I enjoy it because it is more advanced, and I feel learning something new when I put it together, and so that keeps me stimulated. It keeps me engaged. In between those consults and appointments where I might be saying a lot of the same things to people again and again, as far as like how to get an agent or how to get published or how to self-publish. I greatly enjoy helping people one-on-one, but it is a huge time sink, right? So it takes time away from doing the hot sheet or doing a course. And I do enjoy teaching online courses very much, or otherwise I wouldn't be doing these Sunday business sermons if I didn't enjoy talking about the business and trying to help people. Sally asks if I offer early registration, discount, or premium. I don't, but it's a really well-known, effective technique. So if you're able to do it without a lot of fuss, I would encourage you to do it, like whatever your registration system or payment system is. If it easily facilitates that sort of early discounting, by all means, I would do it. Something I learned from Writer's Digest, watching how that business worked with the long-term courses, was that people wait till the last minute to register for stuff. Like, this was a revelation to me. People wait, like just the hour before the course, you're supposed to show up. That's when they'll register, and then of course have a technical problem. And people are often waiting to see if they can get a discount. That was another thing I learned from Writer's Digest, is that people wait for the coupons. If they know that you give out coupons, they are going to wait for the coupon. So keep in mind what you're training your folks to do. I don't offer early discounts currently because it would be very hard for me to do that. It would be too much hands-on management. You can also offer coupon code discounts as well. I would suggest using them in very targeted ways, of course, rather than just a blanket sort of discount. But yes, that can definitely help if you need to kind of gin up some registrations and see what interest is before, the day the course goes live. Keith says, what do I see as the future of webinars or online courses? Is the market wide open? Is it close to filling up? Somewhere in between? Well, it's funny because when I started doing, was it Social Media Bliss? It was somewhere like in those early years of me trying various things. People said the online course it's the saturated market. Stop trying to sell your online course. We're all full up. And it's of course, that's nonsense. Yes, there are going to be more people, especially now, offering online education and teaching. There are going to be more free opportunities as well. But I think you can still be successful. There is room for everyone. It's really about knowing who you're trying to help or teach, and what sort of benefit you offer them, and making sure that it's relevant and resonant for this moment in time. And also, right now, there's also this decision you have to make about, are you going to charge or are you going to make it free? Everyone's very anxious right now. People are losing their jobs. And so there are some things that maybe you make for free, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't charge for courses. But you'll want to be very thoughtful about how you launch and how accessible you make the material. Gita says that she teaches regular classes in person, and she finds it challenging to translate that material into an online course. Her sense is that it has to be more simple with smaller objectives. I agree. Yes, I think one thing I've learned with the longer term online courses is that each week it's really helpful if you have this small discrete goal or accomplishment tied to that week. Especially, with online courses, if people have busy lives, if they are working a full-time job, it can be hard for them to get to that, maybe spend as much time as they would like. But giving them very clear guidelines about what's going to be expected week to week, and helping them get an opportunity for feedback as well, I think is important, whether that feedback is delivered live or in writing or in a forum setting. I do have a blog post at my site about the title is something like, so you want to teach writing online, or so you want to teach an online writing course. So Gita, if you look for that post at my site, I go into some of the particulars of teaching writing specifically, which I know you teach writing, and some of the things I've learned about parceling out your curriculum online over an extended period. Okay, we're almost to the top of the hour, and I'm just scanning through the last of the questions here. I've been focused on the Q&A box. I apologize to anyone in the chat. There's only so many eyes in my head. Let's see. Emily mentioned StreamYard, which integrates with Facebook and YouTube. And she asks if I integrated Facebook and YouTube from Zoom. So what happens with the Facebook and YouTube integration is that once you start the webinar or the meeting in Zoom, there is a little menu option that says share to Facebook, or share to Facebook Live, or share to YouTube Live. And then you'll get some interstitial menus that ask you, just to confirm that you want to go live and it should go live to this account, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty seamless and straightforward, although this is the first time I've done it, so I don't know what the results look like yet over at Facebook. It may be a disaster. I hope not. Mark hasn't come running in saying, oh my God, you have to stop the stream. So I assume that things are going okay on the Facebook end. But I've found it really easy, but you do have to have the Zoom webinar plan in order to do that. I'm not aware of that functionality being available on just the basic Meeting Pro plan. Jenny asks, how important is it to offer some gift or perk to joining an email list, like exclusive access to a PDF document? I have never done that. And I am a huge outlier in that I have not done that. I know for sure if I offered some gift or perk, I know that subscriptions to the newsletter list would go up. But, you know, it's just not that important to me, which I know I've said that a lot during this sermon. There are just some things that aren't worth it to me to create. And I'm sure it would be simple enough, but I just don't wanna, and I don't. But it is definitely a best practice. And I would try it both ways. If you're able to do some testing, some A/B testing, you could do this with Mail Munch, for example, with a pop-up. You could have one test that doesn't offer the freebie and then another one that does, and see what happens. You also have to track really closely what happens with the people who take the freebie. Do they immediately drop off the list? What are you sacrificing in terms of list quality? Sometimes it's not a big deal, right? They drop off, and so yeah, they weren't right for you, and that's okay. But just, you know, track and see what success is like, and make sure you measure it against some other types of offers. All right. And then the last question I'll take, and then we'll wrap up here, is from, who is it from? Joel. Joel wants me to talk a little bit about my technology. So the technology that I use to run online courses, as far as like camera, microphone, etc., I have a iMac, and I use the built-in webcam on the iMac. And then you'll notice here I've got kind of this fancy microphone. It's an Audio-Technica microphone. It plugs into a box on my desk, which then plugs into the computer. I don't know the technical name for it, but it's like a Scarlett Solo USB sort of thing. So I like having this more professional setup because I do so many things where I think really great sounding audio is important to just people taking you seriously. So there's obviously this webinar, but client meetings and podcasts and all the rest of it. This is a little bit of an investment. You know, this will set you back a couple $100s. But if you're really committed to online education, you definitely want a good microphone. You could get a cheap microphone, USB microphone, a Yeti, like a Blue Yeti. That'll be great. That'll work wonders. And if you can't afford that, the Apple standard issue earbuds that have the microphone on the lapel wire, those actually sound pretty good. So you could also try that and see what the results are like. If I'm doing a self-study course and I need to capture myself talking on video, you know, I don't have anyone live attending, then I use a piece of software called Camtasia to capture all of that and then make edits. I don't use the more high-powered editing suites like the Adobe editing suites. I have them, but Camtasia is just simpler. There's also a competing piece of software called ScreenFlow that also works in a similar way, and either one should be helpful if you need to, you know, edit things into lessons or create interstitials or transitions. All right, so thank you all for joining me on this holiday weekend. I hope this was useful. I know there was quite a bit of lead up to some of the meat of today's session, but I felt like it was important to understand kind of where I was coming from. You can find out, of course, about my paid online courses at my website, and I have more Sunday business sermons coming. So a week from today, I'm going to be doing a sermon on Gutenberg and WordPress. And if you haven't heard about Gutenberg, but you're a WordPress user, then you might want to check that session out. I'm going to tell you about the joys and pains of moving over to the Gutenberg editor as a WordPress user. So thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful holiday. Bye-bye.